I think I said something that all of us thoroughly enjoy, and that's talking about themselves. So I want to ask you a question first before I start this evening. In working with Glenn Clark, and we knew him so well, he was in our home often, and I remember quite well one time I got thoroughly disgusted with him. Now listen, wasn't anything wrong with Glenn Clark, but that was my stage at that stage of the game, you see. If you did anything that didn't exactly fit into my pattern, I thought you weren't too good. So anyhow, Glenn did, and I thought he just was doing all wrong. So after the morning session, we went for sake. I waited. So beware if I wait for you. And you see me waiting, you never know what's coming. But so anyhow, I waited for him. He came close to me. I said, Glenn, I need to speak to you. All right, Ruth, he said. He was a darling. And if you need anything, even to speak to him, he'd let you speak to him. So I took him back in the prayer room. I thought that the thing I had to say needed to be in the prayer room. So I took him back in the prayer room, and I said, Glenn, you know that if I invited somebody to my house to dinner, I'd fix the best dinner I knew how to fix, but I certainly wouldn't put anything on the table that would give them indigestion. He said, what in the world are you talking about, Ruth? I said, you let people come into the CFO camp that don't think like we think, they don't act like we act, and they certainly are not helping us any. And the fact is, I think you're just serving up the wrong food. Well, I got my lesson. I learned a lesson that I will never forget. And working with Glenn Clark, you always learn lessons that you would never forget. In his very quiet, lovely way, he took hold of my hand and he said, my child, I want you to know this is not my camp. He said, God gave me the vision. It was not my vision. It was his vision. And when he helped me organize the first camp at Lake Coronas, it was not my camp, it was his. And of course, I can't say to him, send in, that you can't send in this person or that person, that you can't do this or you can't do that. I have to listen to him, and what he says do, we do. Who he sends in, we love, and that is the meaning of CFO. I never forgot, dear people, and the rest of my life, I grew into a spiritual liberty that I had not had before, being a Methodist. He's one and I'm one, so I can say that to him, see. Right. So anyhow, everything that I've done in CFO since that day has been seasoned by that one little experience with Glenn. Go back to me. When I was a little child, I loved Jesus. I was born in a home. My parents were loyal to the Methodist Church, were active in it. I loved Jesus. Sunday school, I grew to love him more and more because the Sunday school teacher used to always tell me I wasn't always good as I am now. Anyway, she used to always have to speak to me because I love to make people laugh. And I love to pull hair of the girls in front of me, and I love to step on the boys' toes. So, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I wasn't too easy for a teacher. I can see that now, bless her heart. She was a darling. She's in heaven, so she understands I'm telling you this. So anyhow, I remember quite well sitting in the corner 3 times in my youth, in my childhood. I'm not going to tell you about my youth. You young people will have to have a private conference for that. But I did have to pay for 2 watermelons that I stole in the night in a watermelon patch. But I wasn't by myself. So anyhow, now come on back to me. So I want to say this to you tonight. The fact that I grew up loving Jesus. But it wasn't until I think it was my senior year in college I had volunteered to go as a missionary to China under the Methodist Board. I was graduating from Scarrett College at that time in Nashville, Tennessee. And I began to realize in my study of majoring in the New Testament that my study was telling me something. It was saying to me, Ruth, you've done well in loving Jesus, but you've done very poorly in learning to know him. And I began to realize that such a thing was possible. You can love a person without knowing them. You cannot love them to the fullest without knowing them. But sometimes husbands love wives, but they never get to know them. Wives love husbands, they never get to know them, the inner depth of their being. They just don't know. They don't know your deep desires. And since my lead died 5 years ago, I began to realize so many times that there were so many wonderful things in him that I never discovered, and there were so many wonderful things in me that other people have discovered since that he never knew. So you see, we wonderful Christians, and I love to talk to Methodist women and others along this line. We wonderful Christians love Jesus, and CFO, we love Jesus. But my dear friends, loving him is not enough. We have got to know him. We have got to know the very vitality of his presence. We've got to know the vitality of the presence of God as he leads us to God. So then, realizing all of a sudden that I didn't know him, I began a tremendous journey into the life of Jesus by beginning to gather together all the books I could find that had been written on any phase of his life, all of his miracles of healing, all of his miracles of loving, and I began a 2-year study. It took me 2 years to get through those books, to come into the realization that I was looking into the face of a tremendous man. We were talking, this is Father's Day, and as we were having your Father's Day program and appreciating fathers, and we don't do it near enough. And when I begin to talk to you about the beginnings of CFO, I'll tell you about some great men that really we began to know so well. But now we come back to God as Father. And Jesus gave his life and everything he had in his ministry to teach us what God is like. And then I realized that if I was to accept the challenge to follow him, it merely meant that. Follow him into the knowledge of his revelation of his own Father and mine. So I began my journey into the life of Jesus, and it's had a very varied experience at different roads I've traveled. A journey into the miracles with Jesus, a journey into brotherhood with Jesus, a journey into the fatherhood of God and his relation to his Father with him. And so I am talking to you like this, and we'll be doing it this week, hoping and praying that I challenge you to begin a terrific DEPTA study of the man Jesus. Study him as a human man, a great man. Study him as God. And your life will be so different when you get to know him. You'll never be lonely because he is with you. You'll never need wisdom. He's got it. So I'm offering you a brand new pattern of abundant living as we work together this week. Now, let me stop. Now, this is not a period. This is a comma. My talks have all kinds of periods and commas as we go through. And if I happen to tell you this is a comma, you've got to hold it there till I get back to it. See? If I tell you it's a period, you can stop there and forget that that's where you've been. Now, don't forget it. So anyway, now I'm coming just a little bit to my history in CFO. Did you ever know Margaret Montague, the poetess, the Virginia poet?
No.
Well, she lived in Richmond. She was a very good friend of my Lee's and helped him lots in the work in the institutions in Virginia. By the way, we had the great privilege of having Betty, Earl's wife, work with my husband had her. I didn't have her. I hardly ever saw her, but he saw her. But I saw him once in a while. But anyway, that was a long time ago. That sounded bad, didn't it? But it wasn't, and I meant it good. So, well, anyway, Miss Montague called me and said, I don't know whether you have ever heard of Dr. Glenn Clark. Well, at that time, I had, because he had prayed for me when I was very ill. I'll tell you a little bit about that experience too. And discovering the many get the DPH points in the whole process of recovery. Now, back to Glenn Clark. He came to Richmond. We entertained him in our home, and when we finally found out who the man was and how important he was, we, as all preachers do, we fling a big party, and bring in all of our friends to show them what we've got. Anyway, Glenn came, and he got so interested in Lee's work in the prisons in Virginia that he invited Lee to join with the 12 men in Washington on New Year's Eve called the 12 Men of Prayer. I wonder how many of you have ever heard of that in your CFO experience. Will you raise your hands? Yes, a few. I wish I had time to tell. That's a tremendous adventure. All that Glenn did was a great adventure. And he didn't have one, he had a dozen, and all going at the same time. Absolutely amazing. I've tried to follow that pattern, but I get in a mess. But anyhow, here we are now. Glenn's in Richmond. I meet him. He's in my home, and we are very cordial. I'm a good hostess. He certainly is a good guest, and we have a terrific snowstorm, and Lee has to drive into Petersburg to get a plane to come back to Minneapolis. All right, now, he goes to New York to the meeting of the 12 Men of Prayer. And then Glenn decides that if you're going to have 12 men of prayer, you ought to have 12 women of prayer. So I don't know whether you all know that or not, but when the 12 men of prayer were meeting, here were 12 women of prayer. I was one of those. That's how I happened to be there. So I told my story of my recovery from impossible illness to that group of 12 women. Out of that came an invitation to New York to Marvel Collegiate Church to speak, Dr. Norman Benson Peale's church, to speak on healing power of God. I went. Well, how many have been in Marvel Collegiate Church in New York? Anybody here? Right. Well, you know how high and tall that pulpit is? When you get up there, I thought I was in heaven and didn't have to go any farther. So, anyhow, when I got up there and I gave my talk, I did my sharing, I looked right down there on the third bench, and there was Glenn. Well, I said to me, what's coming out of this? That's the way I talk to the Holy Spirit in me. What are you up to now? See, I'm talking to him in me. So anyhow, after it's all over, Glenn comes around here, and I'm coming down the steps from the pulpit, if you remember how it is. And he comes up and he says, listen, I want you to hold this date, next August. You are coming to Winnipesaukee to give us 7 lectures on prayer and experience of prayer and your healing. I said, who's going to be at Winnie? I never heard CFO. I never heard it in my life. He said, that's my business. Now, that's Glenn, a most amazing man. But I want to tell you, as I told a couple of people today, when he said to you, I want you to do this, you did it. Now, in the most beautiful way, most loving way, the most Christ-like way, you felt that when he opened the door for you, that God himself was opening up the whole universe for you to step into a new direction of service, see? So, I looked in my calendar and I said, yes, Dr. Clark, I can come. So we made the appointment. When I arrived at Winnie on the 16th of August, that following summer, I looked at all these people up here. They used to have 500, 400, 500, 600 people there. And I was just beginning. I didn't know much, but I didn't know it then, So anyhow, I went, and the time came. Here was Starr Daily, Dr. Frank Laubach, Glenn Harding, anybody here know Rufus Mosley? I got a cute thing to tell you about. I tell you, these early men were something that started CFO. And if you really get to see the basis of CFO, you'll say to yourself, I'll never do without it. And listen, dear people, what we've got to do in the days to come, let me get this in there. You raise your hand when I ought to sit down. Yeah, right, raise your hand. Right, please. I got a joke on that too, but I'll hold on that one. anyway, I was at Winnie. And the first evening, I went in, and they said they were going to talk about the program, like you all do tonight. I saw all of it up there. I was scared to death. I didn't know a thing about it. But I said, Jesus, listen, if you ever did anything for me, you do it now. And you help me through this thing so that I'll get home safe and living. So that was my approach to CFO. Well, come on down, seriously. That other serious too, but this is more serious. Anyhow, I had the most marvelous week of my life. Do you know, Earl, that they listened to anything I had to say? And I want to tell you, I wasn't used to that in the Methodist Church. You know, I really had to work out my program so carefully in the Methodist Church, and to be careful that what I said right here was in keeping with the schedule and with the discipline. So anyhow, but here, I got up in front of these precious people, and I stood up there and looked at them. I said, I bet you folks wouldn't mind anything I said, would you? No, they wouldn't. Bless their hearts, they didn't know what they were doing. But anyhow, I went on, and I had my first spiritual freedom of allowing of people who would be willing to let me tell them what God had told me the day before. It did not have to go through a book. It didn't have to go through other people's minds. It didn't have to go through a discipline or a church to decide what I would say or not say. Of course, I'm a little bit hard on that right now, but I'm putting across a point to you. And when you're trying to put across a point, you can exaggerate, I learned. So anyway, here we are, and I was in CFO for my first experience. My dear precious friends, that was 1944. My children were babies. I had just come out of this terrible illness, and here I was up at Winnie. Did I have a good time? They put flowers in my hair every day before I spoke. You see, I thought that was customary too. But you won't do that. Where's my flower? So anyway, that was my first wonderful experience. And if I want to say tonight that we have, as I see the future, lest this does not come in my talks, as I see the future of CFO, our purpose has been to inspire and to teach. But I feel like we are called by the Holy Spirit to look into the significance of a CFO sustaining program. That is that we sustain people who come to CFO, that we will work out some plan, some way of all through the year, keeping in touch, learning. It's a gigantic plan. But my dear people, this is the time of computers. If you want to say something that sounds big to me, I say computer, see, today. But we've got to move into big thinking, big acting, because the Holy Spirit asks us to. I thank you.